So, with that, we're going to start our nightly report here. This is going to be a quick rundown of the events of the last 6 hours or so here out of Ukraine. This is for March 22nd, 2022, or the 23rd, actually, now in Ukraine. It's now 12:30 a.m. Kiev time. So it is the 23rd of March in Ukraine. Currently 6:30 p.m. here on the East Coast here in the United States on March 22nd. For those of you that missed our earlier report this morning, it has been uploaded to the YouTube channel, as well as our interview. We had a on-the-streets interview short time ago with Mehmet on the ground in Kiev. He has now returned to Kiev. He was fresh off the train station, and we had an interview with him on the streets during curfew. I might add, I'm sure we are the only on the streets live crew interview probably all night in Kiev, I would imagine. Definitely a pretty cool interview that we did there that is also available over on the YouTube channel. Mehmet's currently getting some sleep. It was a long train ride into Kiev. He arrived safely and is safe there on the ground in Kiev, in the capital, at this hour. And currently getting some shut-eye, but we'll be hearing from him tomorrow first thing in the morning. We'll have updates from him, and we'll be getting some footage and some camera angles up out of the capital city there. All right, so moving on, we're going to kind of go through all of the updates here from over the past 6 to 12 hours into this evening now. I'll be kind of starting kind of like where we left off earlier. I'll reiterate on a couple things, and we're just kind of trying to get everybody updated here on the situation as it's been unfolding there on the ground in Ukraine. We'll also kind of go into the specifics about kind of the situation around Kiev at this time, and kind of the specifics as for those Russian troop movements, which we have been watching closely over the past few days. Okay, so to reiterate from a couple earlier reports from this morning's report, again, you can go and check out that report over on the YouTube channel. It's now been uploaded for the March 22nd, and this report will be uploaded there as well after it is done. So, earlier today, U.S. President Biden warned that Russian President Putin is weighing his options of deploying chemical weapons in Ukraine. Again, we've been watching these developments very closely. There's been many UN Security Council meetings that we've been following over the past week, as we've been seeing, discussions and deliberations here between the Russian Federation and NATO and its counterparts, and as they've been kind of going back and forth with this diplomatic dialogue here. Again, Russia saying that the West is not listening to any of its concerns, saying that it's being blown off as propaganda, which is quite accurate because it is, again, mainly propaganda. This narrative that they've been building there. We've seen some concerning developments with the with the possibility of chemical leaks in the Sumy region, ammonia. There was an ammonia leak the other day that was quite concerning. There's been all of this talk and rhetoric about these chemical or biological weapons over the past week, and so that rhetoric has definitely been kind of turned up to 11 now, and has been, again, it's been very concerning. Hearing that language from both sides, and again. Russia has kind of a pattern now that it's proven to us over the past month. We've seen this pattern over and over and over again of how they kind of build these narratives up, and then it's usually like we can see it coming. We can see what they're going to do. U.S. intelligence usually points to it, and then it ends up happening. You know what I'm saying? And so we've seen the pattern now, and I'm sure we're going to continue to see, we're going to see continuation of this same pattern. And I only hope, my hope is that, it doesn't actually end in some sort of chemical attack. that would be extremely unfortunate, and a major escalation here in this situation. It looks like the our CNN team out of Lviv is actually about to go live here for report 2, so it's interesting timing. If they have anything interesting for us to listen in on, I might take a peek over there. We've been monitoring these hot mic feeds from a multitude of news teams for a while now. It's been very insightful listening to some of the background conversation that these news crews are having. And we often get reports before they go live because we're listening to their own hot mics before they start broadcasting. And usually those reports are recorded and they play them back later sometimes, you know what I'm saying? And so we often get reports from these hot mic feeds. We get tidbits of information of like what's going on in Lviv or what's going on in Kiev much sooner than they get from being broadcasted. I think eventually that'll change, though. We're probably going to lose access to a lot of these hot mic feeds eventually, unfortunately. But yeah, they've been very insightful, and they've also been sometimes quite comical as well. Anyway, moving on here. Ukrainian forces say they have regained control of Markariv. I covered this earlier. West of Kiev, there's been a lot of activity in that region by those Russian forces. I'll go into some of the specifics when we jump over to live UA map here shortly. Zelensky, in an address earlier to Italy, said, do not be a holiday resort to those promoting the war. More sanctions, more pressure. Again, he's trying to get Italy on board here with and a multitude of other countries actually on board with sanctioning and embargoing. There goes a car there on our Lviv cam and cam 3. Sanctioning and embargoing a lot of these Russian oligarchs that vacation or have assets in some of these countries, especially Italy. Ukraine government military advisor Lyubov Tybulska told CNN today, March 22nd, that Putin's power will be limited by his own people. Again, referencing the protests and the uprising that is happening in Russia right now, that we've been covering here on the live stream a multitude of times over the past week. Past few weeks now, we've seen the protests occurring in Moscow and St. Petersburg, all over the world, not just in Russia. The arrests made by Moscow, the arrests made by Russia, as they kind of clamp down on things like protesting in the country, protesting and speaking out against the war. I think we're going to hopefully see a escalation in the amount of backlash that the Kremlin receives for the war, especially as it continues on, right? As more parties get involved, I think the amount of backlash from the Russian people will only increase, and in turn, I think the amount of censorship that you see by the Russian government will increase as well. Again, covering earlier, speaking to the more parties getting involved here, Belarus could soon join the war in Ukraine. This was stated earlier today by U.S. and NATO officials. Again, we've been watching those Belarusian forces amassing in Belarus on the southern border, the northern border of Ukraine, the southern border for Belarus there, near Brest. That's one of the major towns that we've been seeing a lot of the activity from our Maxar images. Again, when we go over to live UA map, I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that, but really the gist there is that Belarus has been we keep hearing Belarus isn't going to get involved, Belarus isn't going to do this, Belarus isn't going to do that. And it's the same thing that we heard from Russia before they invaded. Okay, before Russia invaded Ukraine, they said we're not going to invade Ukraine. Okay, we're never going to invade Ukraine. We're not going to do that. We have no reason to do that. Same thing what we're hearing now from Belarus. Okay, and I've been speculating this. Every step of the way, I've been speculating this, that we're going to see Belarus get involved here after repeating that they're not going to get involved. They're going to get involved. We're going to see forces moving over that border, Belarusian forces to be clear, moving over that border in tandem with Russian armed forces, moving over that border down from the north, probably cutting off access in the west there. Again, I'll talk more about that when we hop over into the live UA map here shortly. Food and medical supplies in Kherson have almost ran out, Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oleg Nikolenko said today. That comes as Kherson has been under heavy conflict over the past few weeks. It is now primarily under Russian control in that territory. There has been civilian evacuations happening there for some time as well. Again, Kherson has been heavily hit. Mariupol has also been heavily hit. A lot of those towns on the southern coast near Crimea have been devastated in recent weeks. French President Macron considers vouchers for middle to low income households as prices rise due to the ongoing conflict. As that humanitarian crisis kind of unfolds, and this refugee crisis unfolds, people need places to go. And so as housing becomes harder to find, as the housing shortage increases, they have to find ways to be able to fill that demand. Again, these vouchers are for middle to low income households as prices rise due to the ongoing conflict. And so basically, that's kind of an effort by the French president there, to help stimulate the economy and keep things moving, to help keep people sustained during the conflict there. And so, talking again about just the refugee crisis, as more people leave Ukraine, they're traveling to places like the UK, they're traveling to places like France, they're traveling to places like Poland, Germany, etc. All these different European countries, and so there's now a shortage of housing. Prices are increasing on goods like food, etc. Services like electricity, heat, gasoline, petrol. Again, prices have steadily been increasing on petrol and gas. So it's a multifaceted shortage here, a multifaceted situation that we are experiencing there in Europe. Moving on here, a Ukrainian counterattack northwest of the capital of Kiev appears to have made some headway, jeopardizing Russian efforts to encircle the city and threatens to cut off Russian units. Again, we've seen quite a bit of progress there by those Ukrainian forces northwest of the capital of Kiev as they look to kind of cut off those Russian forces, put the pressure on them so they cannot continue to encircle the city there of Kiev. The U.S. has reported that it has seen indications that some Russian soldiers have gotten frostbite in Ukraine because they lack the appropriate cold weather equipment. Again, harkening right back to the early days of the invasion here, just a few weeks ago. I was speaking a lot during those times of the lack of equipment that a lot of the conscription forces, a lot of the reservist forces had been sent in with. A lot of it was old Soviet, gear, right down to the camo, the camo BDUs, etc. that they're wearing. And right back to, again, like their cold weather equipment. They're wearing outdated stuff. Some of them are under-equipped, so they don't have proper things. They were sent in with gear when temperatures were maybe a little bit milder, and now temperatures have changed in some portions of the country. It's now looking to warm up, though, in a lot of the portions of Ukraine. Again, we're coming kind of into the mud season there in the spring, coming up on that very shortly here. So again, it's been kind of an uphill battle for those Russian forces dealing with varying weather and conditions, ground conditions there. Not only for travel there, but just everyday existence on the ground has been hard for them, and so that is something that the Ukrainian defense forces have had kind of going for them in their favor, as the weather has been shitty. The Russians don't have the supplies that they need, right? And so it's definitely affecting their ability to fight. Okay, so the U.S. Defense has said that the Wagner Group, a paramilitary group sponsored by Russia, is currently active in Ukraine. This comes on speculation that they had been operating in the country for some time, but there's now official proof and official reports by the U.S. Secretary of Defense stating that the Wagner Group and amongst other paramilitary corporations is operating in Ukraine. And again, we've known this for some time. It's been pretty clear right back to before they moved over the border. They had operatives in saboteurs, sabotage groups working within the border. Russian forces are continuing to fire upon Mariupol from the Azov Sea. The U.S. defense officials say. Again, Mariupol was bombed multiple times earlier today. So I believe some Russian aircraft were actually shot down over Mariupol, over the city, earlier today. In fact, if you look here on the map, you can see just how surrounded Mariupol is. It's just a pocket of Ukrainian forces left there in Mariupol as that city has become completely surrounded. A lot of people were really worried about Mehmet, earlier, being out in the streets in Kiev. But if he was in any other city in Ukraine, if he was in Mariupol or Kharkiv, yeah, he would not have been out there on the streets. He would have been in a shelter, in a bunker somewhere, or at least in his house. He would not be out there on the streets, especially in a city like Mariupol. If you want to talk about somewhere that is dangerous in Ukraine right now, Mariupol and Kharkiv are by far, Kherson, Mariupol, and Kharkiv are by far the most dangerous areas to be, without a doubt, 100%. Just looking here on the map, you can see how dangerous Mariupol is. It's effectively locked out from the rest of, landlocked, I would say, from the rest of Ukraine, and has been completely encircled by those Russian forces. Again, there's been a lot of reports of shelling and bombing in Mariupol today, throughout the day. And in fact, earlier today there was that report of a Russian aircraft that was shot down over the city of Mariupol while it was dropping some ordnance, some munitions on the city. U.S. President Biden warned today that President Putin could resort to anything now that his back is against the wall. Again, as Putin has been, put between a rock and a hard place here, I've been, saying for quite some time that it's, most likely that he's going to resort to increased bombardment on some of these targets, on some of these cities in Ukraine. I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. Unfortunately, I think, again, as his back has been, as President Biden puts there, as his back is against the wall now, we're going to see kind of an uptick in the violence, not only the uptick in the rhetoric, but an uptick in the actual actions being carried out, in the violence that is being carried out by the Russian forces on the ground in Ukraine. Okay, so yeah, just move on here. So the last journalist in the besieged city of Mariupol, because there are still some journalists in that city there, tell of grief and relief at leaving, getting out of the city there. The Russians were hunting us. They had a list of names, including ours, and they were closing in. Again, that comes as those Russian forces have been opening fire on Western journalists in Ukraine. They have been kidnapping journalists in Ukraine, especially Western journalists. However, they have been exempt from harming or interfering with any pro-Russian journalists or news outlets. Sorry, stand by 1 second here, guys. Okay, sorry about that. I was just answering a few PMs there from some viewers. Okay, so moving on there. Again, we were talking about. I kind of want to just reiterate on this. That a lot of Western journalists are being targeted in Ukraine, especially in those eastern cities, all right, near like Mariupol, Kharkiv. Any journalists that are still in that area, it's been very dangerous for any Western journalists operating in that area. However, Russian journalists and Russian news agencies have been kind of exempt from any interference from those Russian forces on the ground. In fact, they've been able to smoothly operate in a lot of those areas, which just allows Russia to further kind of those narratives that they're looking to build. Okay, so U.S. President Biden again warned today that President Putin could resort to anything again now that he's back against the wall. I just kind of want to reiterate to what I was just saying with this is that um, uh, now that he's kind of in this again between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. Not only are things again like the targeting of Western journalists and stuff like that is that going to increase, but I think and I just want to drive this home for everybody that's listening. Uh, we're going to see, unfortunately, a large increase in the amount of civilian casualties and a large increase in the amount of just sheer bombardment to residential areas. Okay, and so when we're kind of looking for where this is going to go, we're looking at two things. First, we're looking at a introduction of Belarusian forces moving down from the north, okay, and what those moves will look like, where they're going to go, and the other thing is we're going to look for the day that comes, hopefully God forbid, where they switch to kind of that more aggressive stance and they start bombarding targets like Kiev and Lviv, more heavily, and with maybe larger munitions, okay. When we see those two shifts, we know that kind of we've entered this kind of second phase here that they're calling it, that U.S. defense or U.S. intelligence has kind of been calling it this second phase of the war that we'll be moving into when Belarus gets involved and kind of the violence is kind of turned up a notch, so to speak. Um, okay, so moving on here. Let me get my spot back here where I was looking. Okay, so during his trip to Europe this week on Friday, Biden may announce that the U.S. plans to permanently maintain an increased number of U.S. troops deployed in NATO countries near Ukraine. Again, as they look to bolster the capabilities and the readiness level of NATO forces and U.S. forces that are along some of those, Baltic states, so to speak, along the eastern front, you could call it now. The Kremlin on Tuesday, again, that was March 22nd, rejected U.S. warnings that the Kremlin, may be preparing to conduct cyber attacks in response to Western sanctions, saying it did not engage in banditry, air quotes. Again, we've been talking about this on the show for a while now. There's been a multitude of memos, published over the past 6 months or so that I've been speaking about for some time. These infosec memos, these cyber defense memos put out saying, warning both large and small businesses that they need to shore up their defenses when it came to their cybersecurity. Um, and this, also there's been, memos directed towards, everyday individuals here in the West. So this goes for, United States, Canada, Europe. Basically, all of the Western allies need to be very alert and very mindful, and make sure that all of their, their cyber defenses, so to speak, are up to par, and are ready in the possible eventuality of a Russian cyber attack, which is a very real possibility, unfortunately, at this time, and by the hour, I would say. Grows ever more likely, especially as you see more sanctions and more pressure be put on the Kremlin. As you see Putin again being kind of pushed into this so-called corner, backed into this corner, we're definitely going to see, uh, a very high likelihood, I should say a very high possibility that we're going to see uh, retaliation from Russian state actors in the form of a cyber attack. Of course, they can always make it look like uh, another party that is conducting it, the attack. They can, make it look like somebody else. That is always possible, especially when you're talking about something like a cyber attack. But yeah, again, we've been talking about this for some time, and so now we see here, U.S. intelligence warnings saying that they may be preparing for cyber attacks, and then you see the Kremlin pattern. You see the Russian pattern of saying, "No, we're not going to do that." They're denying it, right? Okay, saying they don't engage in banditry, etc. They're not going to do that. And watch, we're going to see a cyber attack, and then they're going to try to make it look like it was another country, or possibly that it was a like a Russian, like a hack group within Russia, right? So that they can kind of direct blame, right? Scapegoat, so to speak. Okay, uh, so I think that's definitely a real possibility here. The Pentagon says the U.S. has seen indications Ukrainians are going a bit more on the offense now. Again, as we've seen a lot of those counter attacks over the past 72 hours here or so, aim to cut off the flow of those Russian troops in and around Ukraine in a few different regions, up by Irpin and Hostomel. There, there's been a large push by those Ukrainian forces to kind of push those forces out of the northwest beyond Kiev. There, they've definitely been working very hard up there to defend the city from those advancing Russian forces. Putin's chief spokesperson refuses to rule out the use of nuclear weapons if Russia faced an existential threat. Again, there's been a lot of rhetoric being passed around on this topic the past week or so. Again, we're going to have to keep a close eye on that situation. Again, that spokesperson refusing to rule out the use of nuclear weapons, not saying that they're going to directly use them or not, but definitely that is a dicey statement, and a very risky line of rhetoric, one would say. French car maker Renault resumed production at its Moscow factory on Monday, March 21st. However, the return will only last for 3 days. An interesting development there from that French car maker Renault. FBI says hackers scan networks of U.S. energy firms ahead of Biden's Russia cyber attack warning. Again, kind of feeding into that same headline there about the possibility of those Russian cyber attacks. The Biden administration official Jake Sullivan said they have not seen China provide weapons to Russia since the Biden call. Again, they're trying to keep a close eye on China, see if they're going to be sending any financial aid, any lethal aid to Russia. Again, there was also reports that were circulated last week about the possibility that some private military corporations, possibly shell corporations, were being set up in China, and that possibly those private military entities would be getting involved in Ukraine as well. There's also been possibility for, of some entities in the Middle East, some militia groups getting involved here. We had the Syrian fighters that were possibly heading to Ukraine. The Chechens also are getting involved, possibly the Belarusians. Definitely, there's a lot of parties that are looking to get involved here on the ground in Ukraine. We're definitely going to be keeping a close eye on that as time goes on. At least one was reported dead as a result of a Russian missile attack on the Pavlorahad 2 train station in Pavlorahad in Dnipro-Petrovsk. In addition to the death, the attack derailed 15 freight cars and destroyed stretches of that rail line. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Biden will announce a further package of sanctions on Thursday. That's the 24th, so 2 days from now, or a day from now. Again, further sanctions, and so again, increasing that risk that we might see possibly retaliatory cyber attack or further actions from Russia as well. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that situation closely. Lastly, up on this list of reports here, the German Chancellor said sanctions on Russian energy imports must be, quote, manageable for European countries, again, as they look to reduce the impact from totally alienating Russian fuel from the European economy. They're even here in the states, there's pressure being put on the U.S. on everyday residents as fuel prices increase. So they're kind of looking to reduce that impact that they're going to have on German citizens, on European citizens, on U.S. citizens, with these fuel prices and with these fuel costs going forward. All right. So with that, guys, is my list of updates there for you for the night of March 22nd. In a few moments here, we're going to be switching over to the situation, the live UA map here to get a situation report for you guys on some of those more recent developments here that have occurred over the past. We'll go through about the past 6 to 8 hours, and we'll get everybody kind of caught up on those developments. But stand by on that. I will need just a few minutes here before we continue on with those updates.
Very specific.